Marvel villains are changed a lot between their comic book debuts and big screen debuts. Often these changes are in service of pacing or to better integrate them into the cinematic universe, and sometimes they're Trevor Slattery. Today let's take a look at 8 Marvel villains and how their origins were changed for the movies. We haven't really gotten a lot in the way of Thanos' origins in the MCU, despite him being the big bad for the first 3 phases of the series. Sure, we get a look at his conquering of planets, adoption of Gamora, and a hefty chunk of his rock-collecting hobby.
Now, they're minerals. Jesus, Marie, I got some geodes coming that are very delicate, all right?
But with the arrival of his brother Eros in Eternals, it would seem that Feige and company are bound to inform us even more in the not-too-distant future on where Big Purple Scrotum Face actually came from. And hey, just the fact that we have Eternals now really cements that we probably will learn about Thanos' early years. See, Thanos in the comics was born of the Eternals Lars, aka Mentor, and Sui-San. I don't know if I'm pronouncing those right because I've read them and that is it, and I'm not going to seek out. Look, they're dumb names. It's a comic. They had 2 children, future Avenger Eros and Thanos, who was born with the Deviant syndrome. His birth drove Sui-San crazy, and she tried to kill him when he was born, which, you know, on the one hand, infanticide, bad, but also maybe not the worst option in this case. Anyway, Thanos was born in an eternal utopia known as Titan, and through the influences of Death herself, wound up dissecting living creatures and eventually his own mother, which just, throwing it out there, probably not going to wind up in the next Disney-backed Marvel adventure. Anyway, long story short, Thanos wound up exiled and traveled the cosmos, murdering indiscriminately and upgrading his own power set in any way he could. It was only later in life, after all this madness, that he discovered that he had been doing all of this for Death herself, whom he had always thought was just another citizen of Titan. Which, by the way, awful deduction skills on this dude. When he returned to his decimated homeworld, she shows up and tells him to prove himself to her, and instead of going, "Hold the phone," he just accepts her brushing off of his query and kills all of the children he's produced with alien babes across the universe. Like, bruh, simp much? There's a lot more here, including the creation of Drax the Destroyer by Mentor to take down Thanos, and the first interaction with Tony Stark, but long story short, rather than seeking out the Infinity Gauntlet to balance the universe, comic book Thanos just kinda wanted to impress that sexy AF personification of death by wiping out half of the universe. It's really, it's just that simple. Meanwhile, Dr. Otto Octavius, aka Dr. Octopus, aka Doc Ock, aka the Amazing Bowl Cut, has a far simpler but still tragic backstory. See, he was raised by an overweight and protective mother and an abusive father. He learned to trust his mother and to do as she said. After all, she was supportive of his dreams, protective, and, helped usher him to his dream job as a nuclear physicist, as many of these villains are wont to do, which oddly enough, his mother had sort of pushed for after the death of Octavius's father in a construction accident. While in this position, he developed his famous arms, which allowed him to work with dangerous chemicals. And honestly, things were on the up for the good doctor. He was kind of a dick, but he had respect. He was a genius. Then, love happened. Where Spider-Man 2's Doc Ock has a happy marriage that is destroyed by his botched experiment, Earth 616 Comics Doc Ock never got to that point. But he almost did. See, he met a fellow scientist named Mary Alice Anders, and man, she was way out of his league. But little buddy nutted up and proposed, and she said yes, and it was all happily ever after. Oh wait, no, his mommy got upset. Whoopsie. See, turns out overprotective mothers can be a tad selfish, and Mama Ock forced her son to call off the engagement. He left Mary brokenhearted and returned to his mother, who herself was finding some love of her own. Octavius took poorly to this, raged at Mama, and she had a heart attack and died. With the 2 women of his life gone, Otto's mind was understandably distracted, and whoopsie, Big explosion makes arm fuse to body and brain control arms because of radiation, I guess. Green Goblin, meanwhile, specifically the original Norman Osborn version, was also changed significantly to simplify the story, while also maintaining the core components. Well, not the suit. The suit changed a lot. Anyway, the basic story in the comics is that Norman's the head of Oscorp and the father of Harry, who here isn't Pete's best friend, but is a schoolmate of his, and the two grow closer throughout these early issues, although overall Harry's kind of a dick. And hey, remember Professor Strom here? Well, he's also from the comics, although there he's actually a villainous mad scientist type who was cheated by Norman Osborn and sent to prison. Now, while going through Strom's notes, Norman tries to recreate some of his experiments, even going so far as to miss out on Parents' Night at the school with Harry. You know, like a total dick. In lieu of being a good dad, Normie overworks and, in his attempts to rip off his old partner further, winds up causing an explosion that, simply put, turns him into a super-powered psychopath. He decides to become, and this is a direct quote, the greatest costumed criminal of all time. Again, like a total dick. In his quest for that title, he goes after Spider-Man, like you do. He gets help from the Enforcers, battles the Crime Master, yada 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 yada. After Strom gets out of prison, he builds a robot to kill Norman, but Spidey intervenes, much to Norman's frustration. He knocks out Spidey using them gobby muscles, and takes the opportunity to try and assassinate Strom, who seemingly has a heart attack and dies. Later on, Gobby manages to capture Pete after learning of his true identity and goes full mask off. Literally, dude's just like, well, there's no way I'm losing now. Howdy, Pete, I'm Norman. That's my Norman Osborn impression. Pete manages to escape his bonds, and after a baller fight, he winds up knocking Norman into a bunch of live wires and chemicals, resulting in that tried and true love of all writers, amnesia. Which I assume was why they included that in Spider-Man 3 with Harry? I don't know. Pete saves Norman, who no longer knows Pete is Spider-Man or that he is the Green Goblin. He and Harry are reunited as loving father and son, and it seems as though Pete has not only saved the day, but also a whole family. Ugh. So yeah, pretty different from the film, wherein Norman is a bit less of a tool pre-Goblin formula, more hands-on in the scientific method, and tries to get Spidey to join him after the wall crawler gets in his way during his turn my enemies into skeletons plan. Okay, that's enough Spidey junk for now. Let's talk Loki. This one's pretty easy. In the MCU, of course, Loki is the adopted son of Odin, originally born of frost giants, specifically Laufey, who abandoned Bebe Loki to die. Later on, Loki tries to sabotage his brother Thor's coronation by letting in frost giants, and of course resulting in Thor getting banished to Earth. In the comics, Loki's adoption is actually foretold by Odin's father Bor, whom Odin kinda screwed over in a battle with frost giants. This prophecy, it's all just dads who are dicks. That's this whole video. This prophecy said that Odin would kill a father in battle, and he would have to adopt that slain individual son as his own, or else Bor would get all Ghost of Christmas Past on him and haunt Odin forever. Later on, the gods of Asgard are doing their frost giant fighting thing once more, and Odin kills Laufey. Laufey's son, Loki, is a little sumgun, whom Laufey had kept secret because, again, bad dad syndrome. He runs out in anger at his father's death, and Odin adopts him as his own. That's basically it as far as his origins go. He did gain a lot of power by betraying the wizard Eldred and making a pact with Surtur, and he had some kids, including Hela. Yeah, not his sister in the comics. From one Avengers movie villain to the next, how about that Ultron fella? This is another one where the differences are actually pretty minimal outside of your usual holy cow comics are complicated junk. For one thing, it's not Tony Stark who invents Ultron, it's noted mental health warning in human form, Hank Pym. Of course, Hank wasn't even introduced into the MCU yet, so of course his part is nixed. Pym is fascinated with the ever-delightful Dragon Man, okay, an advanced android that's also, well, a dragon. After a battle with Dragon Man and Diablo, Pym decides, hey, maybe I should make an android or something. That's my Hank Pym impression. And builds Ultron 1, which immediately turns itself on, and along with having the rapidly evolving mind of a child, is also hella homicidal right out the gate. Ultron 1 erases Pym's memory, sure, escapes, and winds up eventually returning to the lab, where he builds himself up into Ultron 5. He then takes the identity of the Crimson Cowl and forms a new group of Masters of Evil, including a sorta undercover Dane Whitman, alias the Black Knight, aka Sexy Boy Jon Snow. Back to Spider-Man, because I can't help myself, Vulture is pretty dang different from his comic book counterpart. For one, you know, Michael Keaton's getting up there in age, but damn, he's a college sophomore knee-deep in Strange compared to this old geezer. In Spider-Man Homecoming, Adrian Toomes is of course a regular working Joe turned weapons dealer thanks to a little government intervention when he and his crew were thrown out of the Battle of New York cleanup initiative, or whatever the hell it was called. I don't know if it had an official name, but, you know, cleaning up New York, the scrap, for the Chitauri scraps, you get it. Using stolen technology, he took on a high-altitude get-up that looks strikingly like some kind of scavenger bird, and used his dealings to provide for his family. Comic book Vulture, meanwhile, owned a company called B&T Electronics with partner Greg Bestman. It was here that Toomes developed his electromagnetic harness, and that very same day found out that Bestman had been skimming profits and lying to Toomes. While lifting the trader up, he realized that use of the harness had increased his strength, because comics. Bestman demanded Toomes leave, and dejected and without legal recourse, he retired to a farm on Staten Island. He kept working on the harness along with them snazzy wings, and eventually ransacked his old office and stole the money Bestman had taken, thereby discovering for himself a new career in villainy. Presumably because he lived on Staten Island. Don't do that, guys. You're gonna go crazy. He would eventually try to take further revenge on Bestman, but hey, this is an Origins video. Next! So how about Dr. Doom? This one's a bit of a cheat since none of the cinematic Doom portrayals are exactly heralded as, good, but I also relish every opportunity to talk about the cheese fests that are the Tim Story Fantastic Four movies. I could talk about the 94 Corman version, or whatever the hell this is, but we're talking the one with the lovable sadist from Nip Tuck. In the film, Victor Von Doom finances and joins along on the future Fantastic Four space mission, and upon being struck by sunspots or whatever, develops electrical powers and metallic skin, deformity junk, and then later puts on like armor from Latveria to cover the skin. It's silly. The comics version, which I should note is partially derived from comics written after these movies, is also silly. Cynthia Von Doom, mother of, well, you can guess, made a pact with Mephisto that imbued her with mystical powers with which to take revenge on those who oppressed her nomadic people. Shock of shocks, pacts with the devil are generally a bad time, and the powers came with horrifying drawbacks, like a lack of control and the sacrifice of her victims' children. Big yikes. She was eventually killed and left her son with her hubby Werner. Papa was killed years later, and Victor swore vengeance, and soon after found his mother's trunk of magic stuff. Ruh-roh. He used his own technological skills and this magic to conduct that revenge. He soon left Latveria and got a scholarship to New York University, where he met Reed Richards and developed a device combining advanced technology and dark magic. Ignoring a plea from Richards regarding a potential flaw in his plans, Doom pressed on with his device and, using himself as the subject, again, classic mistake, started her up. It didn't go great. He wound up horribly scarred by literal hellfire and expelled from university. One's worse than the other. He returned to Europe, fell in love, found out that he was destined to lead a group of monks, and threw love to the side in favor of power. That's a very big simplification. Upon finding out that Reed Richards had become quite famous as a big deal science man, Doom used the monks to help him develop his trademark suit of armor, including the still searing hot mask, which he used to literally burn away his previous self. Doom then killed the king of Latveria and took the throne for himself. God, I love Dr. Doom. Please, please be the big bad of this net. Please be the new Thanos. Come on, MCU. Come on, do it. Then you could have Mephisto as well. Like, look at that. Amazing. Okie doke. I could keep going, but I can feel the searing gaze of my bosses demanding shorter videos, so let's finish this out with everyone's favorite spiteful son of Wakanda, Killmonger. Much like in the MCU version, Eric Killmonger's goal is to overthrow the royal family. And he does throw T'Challa down Warrior Falls. Beyond that, things are a little different. His parents were killed, and he was enslaved during an invasion on Wakanda by Ulysses Klaue. So, no, they don't team up in the comics.
Makes us look like amateurs.
He wound up in the US and recognized Black Panther, who was on the Avengers roster at the time, and returned to Wakanda with T'Challa after being all like, hey, this bad junk happened to me. In the film, N'Jadaka's plans are spurred on by the murder of his father by T'Chaka, due to his father wanting to take over the world using Wakandan technology. Also, this doesn't have much to do with his origin, but he uses dinosaurs to try and take over, and like, that's super rad. And of course, gotta mention one that I guess isn't an origin per se, but a proper bastardization of the source material nonetheless, Galactus in Rise of the Silver Surfer. Who buddy? Dude looks less like Galactus and more like a frat boy's dorm room on 420. And hey, you want more of these villain origin things? Please, tell me. I can do this all day.